Egboma na-ege ntị, anyị ekene unu ọzọ n'ụbọchị uhuruchi nke taa na Eastern News 24. Anyị si ka nke onye chiri ya zelu. Anyị si ndị be anyị na ọ ya dịrị na mma nụ ya dịka echi na-eche ada agwụ agwụ. Otu anyị kwuru otu akwa ya dịrịrị. Ise. Dịka o si dị, ya bụ ife wetekwelu unu n'oge ugbu a bụ gbasịta maka ya bụ ife na-eme n'obodo anyị nọ n'ime ya. Gbasịta maka agụụ dị n'obodo. Maka ya bụ ife mmiri, ya bụ mmiri ejugo awụ ọnụ. Unu ya ga ife wetara unu ka unu ife na-eme na mgbago ugwu. Maka eche na nwere ihe na-eme na mgbadata ebe a Eastern Region, nwere ife na-emenụ. Geenụ ya bụ ife, ike agwụgo ndị ugwu. Fa na-ekwuzi okwu ka onye ọbụla kewaa na ha ekweghọzi. Maazị Nnamdi Kanu said this, that there will be a time Nigeria will begging us to go. Because such an eye the problem. The more you create the problem to Igbo man, the more corner will put a new strategy. Okay, you will survive for the economy. Take it or you leave it. So don't joke with an Igbo man. An Igbo man has what it takes to make this Nigeria work. But 5 years na yelu rufa. Then I present I can 5 feet na ayewe na olulu ayewa. Neze ife ya bife na-eme nkịta ya bụ mkpu na-ada na north na Yoruba land na ugwu mkpu na-ada ge ya bụ ife ya iji maka ya wee bigesia ya ge dropụra ife iche n'iru akwụkwọ gbasịta maka ihe ndị a niile nụgasị. All right, over to you, sir.
And constituent states raising questions about the effectiveness of its federal system. Federalism, according to analysts, offers a framework for balancing power and promoting regional autonomy, allowing diverse groups to coexist and thrive within a unified nation. In Nigeria, however, the practice of federalism has been marred by issues such as over-centralization of power, resource control, and revenue allocation, ethnic and religious tension, inequitable representation, and marginalization, among others. To discuss this subject, we are now joined by Reverend Father John Segun Odeyemi, an ordained priest into the Catholic priesthood, as well as Ikem Okuhu, a political analyst. Gentlemen, it's good to have you with us. All right, I'm going to start with you, Father Odeyemi. We've been adopting the federal system of governance borrowed from the US over time with current multi-dimensional challenges. Was it right to deviate from the parliamentary system of governance we inherited just after the independence?
Well, thank you first and foremost for having me. My position has always been that borrowing from the US has never been a good idea, because the idea of democracy, even from its origins in the Greco-Roman world, is always a system that is created to suit a particular society and their needs. You take, for instance, the UK, they have a constitutionary monarchy with parliamentary democracy unitary system. Even the US took the idea of democracy, they treated it for themselves. Now, we have always failed to do that. We went over to the US, took what they have, and then we went away from what actually was working for us. And so if you ask me that question, I think that we took the wrong turn, so to say. And for us, we have to go back to even those men, the fathers of our independence, Awolowo, Zeke, Tafawa Balewa, Herbert Macaulay, all those men. They were learned men, they had a vision, they understood what governance was about, and they tried to create a system that will work for us. Right now, the democracy that we think we're operating is not working.
All right. He says the democracy we are operating is not working. Come to you here in the studio now. We look at what is playing out in Rivers State, and some will say that it's just a reflection of the larger conversation in regards to our democracy, the type of democracy we're running, and the fallout from its hands. Because at the moment, some will say that it's not working because the local government, that to an extent should be a little bit more autonomous, are not. And they are more dependent on the state, and the entire value chain when it comes to governance, from the federal to the state and to the local government, seem to be disjointed. not to talk more of the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. Talk to us about this.
If we are going to take it from River State, I will tell you that even the system of government, talking about federal, state, and local government, is an aberration of the concept of democracy. Democracy has the federating units coming together to form it. You don't have layers of 3, you only have layers of 2. So having a local government that is autonomous within a federation that is supposed to have been formed by federating units is an aberration as far as the concept of democracy is concerned. And that is an area they have to deal with to determine whether we are operating a federal system of government or a hybrid of it, whereby even the federating units have their own constituent units. I don't know whether you understand what I'm saying. So having said that, what the Reverend was saying, right to some extent, but personally, I don't believe that there is any system of government that is entirely right or wrong. It all depends on who are the human beings behind its execution and implementation. I don't know, for instance, whether anybody in the United Arab Emirates will give anything to have a democracy. I don't think anybody from Saudi Arabia, especially if you're not counting the very minority of them that are silent. But in terms of quality of life, in terms of getting the dividend from the autocrats, so to say, from the royal family that is ruling them, I don't think the people are complaining as much as Nigerians are complaining about their own democracy. So it's a problem that we have a democracy which is supposed to be responsive to the people, which is supposed to be solving the people's problems, hybridized into something that you can't even describe. Nigeria is failing. Not because we are not practicing democracy, it's because we are not following the precepts, the provisions, the principles of basic democracy, which is being a government that represents the people, standing for the people. We have a system where is demagoguery. You understand? Dictatorship of whoever is in the executive arm. And it has gotten worse progressively as we left the 60s, where you started your statement from, until date. By 1979 to 83, at a certain point, we heard conversations about the questioning Shagari and the way he was managing the country. By the early parts of this one, we had Senate presidents that had been removed for one reason or the other. Now, once you have a firm handshake with the executive, you will stay there forever. It doesn't matter if the people are complaining. It doesn't matter the quality of the human beings there. As a matter of fact, what we have now is a dictatorship of the executive and a conspiracy of the other arms of government. In this regime now, I think the quickest bills that have been passed are the executive bills. The first was the one that changed our national anthem. The second is the one they are working on now for moving us to regional structure. And I know they have approved the purchase of a plane for our president, even though they are diluting by saying that they're going to sell 3. But what are the other issues that affect the people? Inflation rate has increased, has overwhelmed even the managers of the economy. People can't buy. You see people even in marketing. You have commodities and you have branded commodities. Things like tubers of yam and corn that you buy on the streets. Your people can go around. You see women cutting yam in pieces, because families can no longer buy a tuber of yam. This should not be in a democracy, especially in a country as blessed as Nigeria is in terms of human and natural resources.
Very good, Ikem. Now, Father Odeyemi, there's been a call for restructuring of Nigeria for a while now. Now, realistically, is that a game changer within a federal entity with multi-ethnic configuration as Nigeria's? And what are the prospects of homegrown solutions to this kind of scenario we find ourselves?
I'm a firm believer that going forward, we do need to go back to the drawing board. Like if you're losing at every end moving forward, you have to go back and say, where did we get it wrong? And I think we have the capacity to do it. We have the people to do it. But we are always fighting upstream. We're swimming upstream in a kayak without paddles. It's always a problem. We have to get together people who have goodwill, people who I think have the intellectual capacity to come together into some kind of confab, into some kind of meeting. To again, I insist. In fact, number one, I disagree with anybody who thinks that we're operating a democracy. We never operated a democracy. As my colleague just said, it's not just a question of who are the people in government. It is that we do not understand the principles of democracy, either by election, either by the intention of the Greco-Roman fathers, who will appoint people called ministers. In the Latin, the word means servants. All these people who serve us, who say they're ministers, obviously they're not servants of anybody, but that's another issue for another day. Paying attention to the question you are asking, I've always argued that the only way forward, even before this last election, we were wasting our time as usual, because we are people, we suffer some kind of collective cultural amnesia. We forget. And if you forget who you are, you forget where you're supposed to be going. We need to go back to the drawing board. We need to ask ourselves, what can we take from our history? Going back to the old Benin Kingdom, or your empire, the Sokoto Caliphate, all these are people who lived before us. They did things that were beyond their time. And then we'll say, what is the world around us saying? What can we learn from Japan, for instance? As far as I'm concerned, Japan has the best system of government today. And that is why you don't find corruption. You don't find the wrong people in government, because they have been able to integrate their cultural values into their political system, and things work. Children in kindergarten are taught already how to be altruistic. Then we're not the only ones who are multicultural. They're also plural people. They speak different languages. But when it comes to walking around in a city or dealing with other citizens, using public infrastructure, Japan is the place to look at. But we have the intellectual capacity in human resources in this country. I don't too much like to name names, but in a situation like this, I will tell you, people like Professor Morgan, Utomi, Ekwesili, you know them. Even critics, people who have ideas, who have studied in these areas, not because they want to be politicians, not because they want to be in office. We need to get them into a room. Let us construct our own system of government. Let us give it our own name, and let us put it before people. And it has to be a system where it is not for gain, where you're not going to the house because you're going to be paid this ridiculous amount of money they're giving to themselves. How many people buy furniture every month? You get furniture allowance. You're reading newspapers for 1.2 million. It's crazy. So, as far as I'm concerned, to answer that question in a more simplistic way, without a national confab that will look into restructuring the system of governance, the governance we have right now is no governance. It's just a bunch of people who get together to share money. That's the end of story.
All right, Mr. Okuhu. First of all, if we were to take this from human nature, the right or the innate ability for self-survival and self-preservation is something that it's inherent in every human being. That's what the political scientists, or that was what the social scientists would always say. And a lot of people have said that no government will preside over its own demise, or will preside over its own right to oblivion, so to speak. So as it stands right now, if we are arm twisting the government that you need to do the right thing and almost bring down this particular structure or shake it up a little bit, would almost be rendering this particular political infrastructure irrelevant. When do we want to get the political will to do all what we've been saying? Because nobody will want to push themselves out, because certainly this government, they might not say it, but every single action they take, every single utterance they actually put out there is towards 2027, more or less. Talk to me about this.
We have progressed into an era where even the feeling of connection to a certain portion of the country, no matter how imaginary, overwhelms the need for survival. There is group sustenance, there's group agenda, which is overpowering that innate need for the individual to survive. And it played up strongly during the election, where the country was completely polarized into micro units of this is the Yoruba, this is the Igbo, this is the Northern agenda. The Northern agenda, and if you look down, if you look deep, you find out that even this agenda doesn't drill deep. It's just on the surface where the cream of the crop, the elite, the beneficiaries of whatever regime is in place, are driving what they now believe represents the views and positions and needs of the people under their control and their dominance. So that has made it difficult for people to express that desire to push their survivalist agenda to the front. Because if you look at what they played up, and they intentionally did that when there were complaints, videos of market women complaining in the east, in the southwest, and they went to the east, and some people drinking beer in one beer parlor said it's not our business. That conversation has spiked on Twitter, on Facebook, not because it is not the Igbo man's business, but because the people who are benefiting from that thing are making sure that it trends, so that it keeps polarizing those from the southeast against their brothers from the south who share the common need of going to that market to use 10,000 naira to buy a small paint bucket of tomato that they used 800 naira to buy a few years ago. So we are getting much more adrift from one another. If you go to the north, their problem now is how do we ensure that this north-south vacillation of power moves back to us even in 2027, because this person so said is not serving their interest. So that has completely divided us. And here in the southwest, this was the center of all successful agitations in the country. This was the capital of all civil society groups. This was the capital of the media that spiked all the mobilized all the agenda, including the ones that are against Jonathan. Where are the civil society groups now? The CLO, the CDF, CDHR, the so-called, all of them now exist on WhatsApp like every other individual account. All of them now exist on Twitter, just sitting in their remote locations and sending messages. Some of them have even fled abroad, fighting for Nigeria from the comfort zones of Canada, UK, and some of those countries. So who will mobilize? When Nigerians protested, I walked from Okota, where I live, to Ojota during the protest about fuel increase that time. I trekked because there were no vehicles and I needed to be there, at least one day. Who will do that mobilization now? Who will go and invite musicians to come and play? Who will go and mobilize people, students to come out? The forces that coagulate us into such struggle have either been paid off or they have been frustrated into oblivion. So it's a how do they say it in local? It's a long thing for us, because the centers of aggregation of these opinions have all dispersed or been dispersed by intentional dark policies of government or powers that be, or just because we can't come together. And I believe forces are responsible for this.
Very good. Father Odeyemi, you're still with us. Ikem Okuhu just mentioned, the issues of prospects of disunity here as a people to confront, when it comes to a major issue of governance. But it's also been said that resource allocation rivalries poses a major threat to democracy in Nigeria, amid the prevalence of corruption as well. So from where you are, how would you assess efforts, if any, to mitigate, scenarios such as this one, when it comes to collective commonwealth, as it were?
Well, the problem with that is over the years, if you pay attention to history, we have allowed a system that is gone beyond corruption at this time. It's something else. It's a cancer. It's eating into the system. So that even now, when you look at a young kid, about 10, 12 years old, and you send them on an errand, they don't expect you to ask for change. Back when I was a kid, when our older people sent us on an errand, you brought the change, you gave them what they sent you, they decide whether they wanted to give you something or not. Every strata of our society is become imbued naturally now into a system of corruption. And that is because those in government, by the time they entered into this oil business, by the time they decided to be giving out oil wells to individuals instead of the nation, when they decided that, yeah, we can keep drilling, but does it matter if we know how much we drill in a day? Does it matter who is bunkering? Does it matter who is brought a ship from somewhere and loading it on daily basis? The moment a president in Nigeria in history said about a previous president who had looted money, it says, let us go and ask the family how much they will return. Those were the moments historically where people started from stealing millions. We went then into billions. Now they're stealing trillions. There's always that historical part of the whole story. Resource allocation is one of the major issues in Nigeria today. And it brings me back to exactly what I really want Nigerians to start thinking about. We have to change our mindset. We have to change the system. The system is not working. And my colleague just made a point that I will just quickly refer to, saying that people can make comments from the safety of wherever they are. We all can't be in Nigeria. But if I got up at 5 a.m., it's because I think there's something important to me to be here to have a voice. I was home just about 2 weeks ago. I presented a book on Nigerian politics. I'm working on that because I love my country. I know if I do not return home by myself, someday somebody's going to bring me in a box. And I prefer to come home by myself. And I prefer to come to a safe country. Having said that, the question of resource allocation, we need a government that is less focused on sharing money. This is the bane. Why are you who are home saying it is well when it is not well? These are the language of defeatist people. You're asking who we gather these people. They are intelligent people. Look at the man who is this Soludo, the one who was deposed Emir in Kano, now reinstated. That's an intelligent man. We have people all around, and we can come together and propose something that defeats the system. If you propose something that makes sense to Nigerians, and you're willing to make the sacrifice, for instance, say that, like I think it's Sweden, where parliamentary work is by the side. You have a job that you do. Nobody pays you extra than the sitting allowance. When you're going to parliament, you get on the train or you ride a bicycle. Most of these Nordic countries are like that, and they're more successful than us. Let all these big names take away personal desire, take away whatever it is, their dreams. Let us first configure an idea of a government that can work for us, that can work for our people, that will take away all this suffering. The governments are too large. The things we're spending money on is unnecessary. Just like you mentioned, what does our president need a private jet for right now when we do not have a national carrier? It's all about the president. It's not about the people. And the president is supposed to be about the people. So when all is said and done, we need to change our mentality. To even the idea of this zoning, somebody brought it up and it's never done anything for us. The best of us must rule the rest of us. The best of us may be another Muslim. If we're altruistic enough, if we want a society that will work, we all must see how altruistic is, how objective is. We must be able to vote him. I've never been supportive of this zonal system. It is not working for us. You vote, you say it's the turn of the north, it's the turn of the south. I'm voting because it's Yoruba. I'm voting because it's Christian. I'm voting because it's Muslim. Where has it led us? I don't care. Go bring me an atheist.
All right, Father Odeyemi, permit me to just, as we wrap up this conversation, to come to you, Mr. Okuhu. As we try to wrap it up, he said a lot, but these agitations, these conversations have been continuous. These are not new agitations. These are not new conversations. And some say it's only getting worse because it is almost clear to some that the political class will always look after themselves before the citizenry. And how do we change that? Like you said earlier on, that governance is enshrined in that particular ethos, that it's for the people, by the people, and with the people.
Okay, yeah. Before I go to let me respond to the question he asked him about resource allocation. We don't have any problem with resource allocation as much as we have with resource utilization. I worked on a few projects around the Niger Delta as a journalist, as a media person, and if you check the intervention agencies for that region alone, at a point, I think they are trying to right size, if I may use that expression now. But you had the NDDC, you had the one for the militants, you had the one for, there are about 5 of them. And all of them had billions. So what we should do is to leave this resource allocation to chase the matter of resource utilization. Who gets what? What problem does our money solve? Are we building refineries? Are we building roads? Are we creating employment? Are we taking people back to school? Are we paying our policemen more so that they will dedicate themselves to their jobs? Because once security is lax, democracy will certainly be compromised. And then how do we begin to think beyond the fault lines of religion, ethnicity, and some of those imaginary dividing lines that tend to see things as is a you against us things? Because in the end, the poor man in the north is suffering as much as the poor man in the east, likewise in the west and in the south. So if we begin to see ourselves in terms of a binary division of the Nigerians versus the political class, we can engage them, we can confront them, and we can call them to order.
Very good. And on that note, Father John Segun Odeyemi, political commentator, would like to thank you very much for your input in this discourse. And of course, Ikem Okuhu, political analyst here in Lagos, would like to thank you all for your thoughts on those, talking about federalism and of course democratic governance in Nigeria. It's good to have you with us.
And by ekenekwe n'umuno dikunu sibe neso ikwana ni ya na akwụkwọ na Eastern 24 aisikwa na chukwuka bịa ma ya na ero nchani na n'ofu dikunu sibe na esoera n'iru akwụkwọ dịka o si dị ụnụ anụgonu ka ya bụ ife si wee gbata wee kwụlụ ụnụ anụgonu ihe nwanne anyị nwoke kwuru n'iru akwụkwọ ka efe were ikwu gbasịta maka ya bụ ihe ndị a niile nụgasị niile nwanne anyị kwugasị gbasịta maka open grazing bill. Kabaroke drop your own comment on the comment section below. Thank you, and also stay tuned at Eastern News 24.